Hey you guys, happy Monday and welcome back. Starting off our now 7th week, I think, of virtual learning. Let's get into our Today in History. So today in history, April 27th, 4977 BC. The universe is created, according to German mathematician and astronomer Johann Kepler. Considered the founder of modern science, Kepler is best known for his theories explaining the motion of the planets. Alright, so Johann Kepler, as it states here, was a German mathematician and astronomer scientist. He was born in 1571 and became obviously very interested in the study of the planets and astronomy and math. He based a lot of his astronomy theories on the works of Copernicus and Galileo, who are two names that you might recognize because they in their own right were famous scientists and astronomers. And then the work that Kepler did was eventually used by Sir Isaac Newton when he was doing his theories on the laws of gravitational force. Right? So he used work of pretty influential men, and then he influenced the work of an extremely influential man in science. Pretty cool. So later on, his theories were studied, and then in the 20th century, scientists came up with what we now know as the Big Bang Theory, which essentially proved that Kepler was off by about 13.7 billion years in his guess for the birth of the universe. Right? So while the date here isn't correct, pretty cool that somebody was able to try to estimate. Okay, so before we get into our lesson, we actually have not one, not two, but 3 birthdays to talk about. All right, so first, these are all belated birthdays. They were all on April 26th, which was yesterday. I would like to first wish a very happy birthday to Ryan Samaras, Ellie Levin, and Julia Petroselli. So I hope you guys had the most amazing days. Sorry that it was a little gross and rainy out yesterday, but hopefully you found a way to celebrate at home and enjoy the day. Right? Miss you guys, and I hope you had the best day. All right, so let's get into our work. All right, so on Friday, I pushed out the I Have a Dream speech to you. What you guys had here was an excerpt from the speech, and then I asked you 4 questions based on what you would have found in the reading here. And then up here, I also attached the full length YouTube video of a recording of his speech, where if you wanted to watch it, you could have. Hopefully you guys did. Super interesting, super impactful and influential, and I think very moving moment in US history. So that was that. Today we are going to wrap up our lessons on the civil rights movement. I know I feel like that went crazy fast, hopefully because you guys found the information as enjoyable as I did, or do every single year. So for today's lesson, we're going to look at how did the civil rights movement end. All right, so we've talked about people recognizing injustices in society, people calling for a change through protest. We've talked about the rise of civil rights leaders within the movement, right, and the different theories that each of them had, whether it be violent or non-violent means that they supported to enact change. We've talked about the ways that separate but equal was inherently unequal, and we talked about legal ways that we saw African Americans trying to fight for their rights and to prove that the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments were not enough, and that the federal government needed to step up and make real changes to ensure that local governments couldn't make steps to take away the rights of African Americans. Right, so today you're going to look at 3 pretty impactful laws that come out of the civil rights movement, right, that are based in making change in the long run. So you have your 3 laws that are listed in your graphic organizer here. You have the 24th Amendment, you have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and then you have the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And you're going to read about each law, and you're going to tell me what is the significance of it, meaning what is the importance of that law, what does it do, what change does it make, and what does it ensure for African American and minority rights in general in the future, right? So let's just very quickly. So 24th Amendment, basically I just give you an excerpt from the law itself so you guys understand what it's doing. The one thing I did here is I highlighted or put in red and underlined the word abridged because I don't know that that's a word that you guys will be familiar with. So right here it says shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state. To abridge something is to make changes to it, right? So it's saying that you can't deny or like alter in any way, right? To abridge something is an altered version, right? If you ever have maybe reading an ELA, you're reading an abridged version of the text, it means it was changed from the original format, right? So to abridge is to change or alter. And then for the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you have an excerpt from the New York Times on July 2nd, 1964, where this is what's published. It just gives an outline of what were the changes that are being made within this bill, things that they're outlawing or making legally required. Could go either way. All right, and then finally, you have the Voting Rights Act of 1965, right, where you have a short excerpt where it outlines what the Voting Rights Act did. And then you have this table down here, and I just want to clarify the table a little bit for you guys because I think it might be slightly confusing. So what you have here is, it's in two main sections. So it's divided by state, and you have in 1965 and then in 2004, and it lists white, black, and gap. So each one here is the percentage of voters that are of that specific race. So in Alabama in 1965, 69.2% of the voters were white, right? And then you have 19.3% are voting that are African American. And then this gap here represents the difference between those two numbers, right? So if you have 69.2% and you have 19.3%, that's a difference of 49.9%. So that means that there's 49% more whites voting than African Americans. Hopefully that makes sense to you. All right, and then the same, you'll see it's divided up here, same thing in 2004, and essentially what I want you to do is show me like what's happening in 1965, then what's happening in 2004, and what is the difference between those two things, and why do you think that's happening, right? That's going to be really important. Make sure in all of your answers, if you're telling me, all right, what's going to be a long-term impact of that, why? How do you know that based on the evidence that you have? All right, and then this is not an assignment for you guys, but it was brought up to me in my office hours. I had somebody ask me if I had any additional links or resources for you guys, because from what I've heard in talking to you, a lot of you have told me that you found this unit particularly interesting, which makes my teacher heart the happiest. So what I did was I went through it and I found a list of 10 different resources that go into more detail or a little bit, I would say, enriching for you guys revolving around the civil rights movement, right? So the first one I have here is They Didn't Want Me There, Remembering the Terror of Schools, School Integration on Fresh Air. So basically what this is, it's a podcast where they interview Melba Pattillo Beals, who was one of the Little Rock Nine, and she tells her story of what it was like being one of the Little Rock Nine, being an African-American student in one of the very first integrated schools in the South. Right? And then I provide you with a link there. So what I did, I went through each one of them and I provided you a little bit of information so you knew exactly what it was. So here you have Miss Buchanan's Period of Adjustment on Revisionist History, and I highlighted episode 3, which I think would be one that would be interesting to you, where essentially they take a look at Brown versus the Board of Education, and they actually interview the Browns, the people who were at the center of this monumental court case. So that's pretty incredible. You have hanged, burned, shot, drowned, and beaten by the Atlantic. So this is a reading, and it talks about the Memorial of Peace and Justice, which is in Montgomery, Alabama. This one I like a lot, and then the one that follows it also is about the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, because Mrs. Moisa and I actually did this as an enrichment project with our kids last year, and we would have done it with you. So I think this is a really cool opportunity for you guys to read about this and learn about this, and essentially what the Memorial of Peace and Justice is. It's the very first national monument dedicated to the victims of lynchings in the South, right? Because a lot of people, those deaths were not recorded, right? Because law enforcement would cover up the things that were happening, or out of fear, families didn't step forward. And what this man did, his name is Bryan Stevenson. He's the man that created the memorial. Is he, with the help of obviously a team, identified as many people as they could who were victims of racism, and were killed because of that in the South, like coming from Reconstruction all the way through the Civil Rights Movement. And he created this incredible memorial. So here you talk, this one, number 3, talks a bit about the background of the memorial and why he created it. And that's a reading. And then this one is a video where there's an interview with him talking about the memorial, and the woman actually walks through the monument with him, and he talks about the significance of the different parts of it, which is really, really cool, and it gives you an opportunity to kind of virtually tour that museum. Right, so that's pretty cool. This one, Say It Loud, Say It Plain, is a collection of speeches made by African American activists throughout history. It goes through a whole different, all different time periods, different movements, so that's pretty cool if you're looking to hear different African American leaders give some pretty amazing speeches. Here I have the movie Selma. This is actually a movie that was put out into the movie theaters, where it talks about the March on Selma, which we were not really able to get into too much. We mentioned it when we did our protests with marches. That was the specific march that we talk about, but the March on Selma is probably one of the most successful and best known protests of the civil rights movement. So, it's rated PG-13, so you guys should all be good to watch it. It is available. You can, I believe, I'm having issues, but my computer may just be weird, to stream on FX for free. Or you can rent it on Amazon for like $3.99. I found it. Or I don't know if your parents just want to outright buy it, but make sure to ask your parents before you buy or rent anything. But if you have any issues with that and you'd like to watch the movie and that's okay with your parents, just get in touch with me and I'll try and see if I can maybe like screen record, figure something out to get this out to you, because it's a pretty great movie. Here, A Journey to Educational Equity, a virtual exploration of the Civil Rights Movement. So this one's pretty cool. It's kind of like a slideshow kind of deal, made through Google Education, where it takes you, it's essentially a timeline of the Civil Rights Movement, starting with Separate but Equal, all the way through to the Little Rock Nine. So it's pretty cool. There's different documents, there's pictures, there's videos that play throughout the whole thing, so it's a little bit interactive. I found it pretty interesting. PBS, Black Culture Connection, explore the Civil Rights Movement. So PBS has put together this site where they have several different clips about different moments in the civil rights movement. I don't think any of them are any longer than 3 or 4 minutes, so they're just like quick informational tidbits. But if you're looking to learn more about the civil rights movement, it might be a nice way for you guys to go through a lot of different important events in not a lot of time. And then if you happen to find one that you find especially interesting, maybe you can do a little bit more research on it. You can reach out to me and I'll see if I can find more resources for you, anything like that. Number 9 is Crash Course in the Civil Rights Movement. So Crash Course, we did the same thing with World War II. I pushed it out to you guys to read. to watch. So Crash Course is done by